We addressed the controversial call against Grady Jarrett late in the game that helped seal a Bucs victory, and I'll tell you why there's some concern about the defense, but not exactly what you would expect. Let's go.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to the Locked On Bucs Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where we are live right now with our immediate postcast, and we thank you for making us your first listen or view of the day. I am James Yarcho, flying solo without my regular co-host, David Harrison, but of course, you can check out everything he's doing over at Sports Illustrated's BucsGameDay.com. Check out my work over at SB Nation's BucsNation.com. And of course, follow along on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and at DHarrison82. First and foremost, this episode brought to you by our friends at Prize Picks. How does it work? You just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you can watch, including the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL season's about to kick off, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball. There are safe and fast withdrawals currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com and sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign-up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Appreciate all of you joining in on this live postcast. We got Adam in the chat saying, "What's up, James? A win is a win." That is right. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers came away with a 21-15 victory over the Atlanta Falcons, meaning they are still one of the 5 teams in the NFL that Tom Brady has never lost to, but it wasn't without some controversy. Let's go back, and on 3rd and 5 in the fourth quarter with a little over 3 minutes remaining, Tom Brady was sacked by Grady Jarrett, and that appeared to set up the Falcons with a chance to win the game in the final 3 minutes. Instead, Jarrett was flagged for roughing the passer, and it gave the Buccaneers a free first down, and they were effectively able to seal away the game. First and foremost, I take pride in the fact that I'm brutally honest, sometimes to a fault, with my opinions and my views on this football team for our listeners and viewers. That roughing the passer call was terrible. That was a textbook sack by Grady Jarrett. That flag was absolutely awful. And if Shaq Barrett or Vita Vea or Devin White had been flagged for a similar hit, every one of our listeners and viewers would be furious right now. There's no doubt about it. That was a clean hit by Grady Jarrett. I'm not really sure why they called the flag, except we live in a world where people are not perfect. Referees, especially, are not perfect. We see it all the time in the NHL, where if the refs miss a call, sometimes they let something else go. If they make a bad call, sometimes they make another bad call to try to even out the penalty minutes. You could look at this Grady Jarrett roughing call as kind of a makeup call, because on the very play before, Scotty Miller was targeted with a deep pass by Tom Brady, and he was blatantly interfered with. And I apologize, I don't remember the name of the Falcons player who was in coverage, but he didn't get his head around until he had already slammed into Scotty Miller, knocking him back, Scotty still was able to make the catch. An absolutely fantastic game from Scotty Miller, but he couldn't stay in bounds. Does Scotty Miller have a chance to make that catch and stay in bounds if he's not interfered with? Maybe. But if that flag is thrown and defensive pass interference is called, the Bucs would have had 1st and 10 at the Atlanta 13, and that Grady Jarrett sack never happens. So 2 wrongs don't make a right. You can go into the semantics of all of that. The non-call on Scotty Miller was terrible. The call against Grady Jarrett was terrible. Both of these things can be 100% true. At the end of the day, the refs called what they called, and the Buccaneers escape victorious. Marcus415 said it was a makeup call for the missed pass interference call. You have Viper in here saying Pat Mahomes gets those calls often. Viper, I would argue that Pat Mahomes doesn't get those calls nearly as often as Tom Brady does. But I would also argue that Tom Brady probably doesn't get those calls as often as Aaron Rodgers does. Point is, that call is only being made for about 3 to 4 quarterbacks in the NFL. Tom Brady is one of those. Adam Davies in the chat saying definitely a make-up call. That body check on Scotty was terrible. I agree completely. And I don't like the idea of makeup calls, but at the same time, you can look at an egregious non-call going Atlanta's way and an egregious made call going Tampa Bay's way. Either way, the Bucs are able to escape a game that they pretty much dominated for 3 quarters. And then they turn around and it looks like they're about to give up the lead, but they escape with the 21-15 victory. Tom Brady did finish with 351 passing yards and a touchdown on 35 of 52 passing. This is 2 weeks in a row that Tom Brady has had 52 pass attempts. Coming up on the other side, we are going to talk about what went wrong with the defense in the 4th quarter and why it's not exactly time to panic over that bad quarter, but maybe a little bit of panic, and I'll tell you why. But first, if you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor, delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right, Built has done it again. Cookie dough chunk puffs have a light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course, they are covered in 100% real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough without the hassle of making it. Plus, it's good for you. Cookie dough chunk puffs are only 160 calories, and they have a whopping 15 grams of protein. Run to Built.com to snag a box for you and the family. It will be the perfect treat. Or you can find a really good hiding place like I have in my house, and you just keep them all to yourself. Like all Built Bars, the new cookie dough chunk puff is covered in 100% real chocolate. That means they're healthy and tasty. Chocolate-covered cookie dough with a light, fluffy texture. Mwah, so good. What's great about Built is that all of their bars are made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 and you're going to get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKED15, locked on 15 for 15% off at Built.com. Coming back at you here on the immediate reaction postcast here. It's a little bit of a shorter episode, but we are going to be back later tonight with the full episode that you all have become accustomed to. JJ Cohen in the chat. We need both sides of the ball to play all 4 quarters. JJ, I'm glad you said that. Here's what we're going to talk about for a minute. The Buccaneers defense gave up 15 points in the 4th quarter, scoring drives of 43 yards and 70 yards. Those 2 drives combined took 18 plays. And of those 18 plays, 13 of them were runs. The Falcons came into this game as the number 4 run offense in the NFL. The Buccaneers, the number 12 run defense. Falcons averaging 168 rush yards per game. Against Tampa, they rushed for 151. So a little bit less than their average, but they were still clipping off 4.9 yards per carry. In the second half of this game, the Buccaneers lost Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting, and Mike Edwards. But the Atlanta Falcons still stuck to the run, even in a lot of obvious passing situations. Now, my hat's off to Tyler Algier and Caleb Huntley and Williams, who did an absolutely great job in the absence of Cordarrelle Patterson. But the only concern that I have about the Buccaneers defense right now is the health of the players that they lost. Carlton Davis with that hip injury, Sean Murphy-Bunting, and then Mike Edwards. The 2 scoring drives for the Atlanta Falcons came during that string of 3 and outs by the Buccaneers offense. And that allowed the Falcons to come back into the game. The Buccaneers had numerous long, sustained scoring drives. The Falcons' drives following Buccaneers scoring drives went as follows: 8 plays and a punt, 6 plays and a missed field goal, 4 plays and a punt. Now, of course, one of those Buccaneers scoring drives was at the end of the half. So the Falcons didn't have an immediate drive following that. They did receive the second half opening kickoff, but I'm talking more about what the offense did immediately followed by what the defense did. The offense has long sustained drives. The Buccaneers defense immediately after allows 0 points. The defense had 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss, and 2 passes defensed. The offense, being unable to sustain drives late in the game, pretty much left that defense gassed. And they started leaking yards. And they were leaking them by a lot. There was no help at all from the other side of the ball. And we talk a lot about complementary football on this podcast. Complementary football, as I talked about it last week, is not the same as what I'm talking about this week. Last week, I was talking about complementary football and the fact that the Buccaneers still needed to run the ball. There still had to be the threat of the run and some production in the run game in order for the offense to be more efficient. This week, I'm talking about the kind of complementary football where the offense is helping out the defense. 3 consecutive 3 and outs does not help that defense. They're barely over to the sideline before they're right back on the field. And we've seen that, having followed the Buccaneers for years and years. We saw that in the Lovie Smith era. We saw that in the Dirk Cutter era, where the defense would be out on the field for twice the amount as the offense. There's only so much you can do at that point. They're gassed and they're losing players to injury. So I'm not putting the 2 touchdowns by the Falcons solely on the hands of the defense. The offense needed to get something going, and they were clipping right along until that bad stretch. But a bad stretch on offense then made its way into bad stretches by the defense. Am I worried about the Buccaneers defense going up against Najee Harris next week with the Pittsburgh Steelers? At the moment, no. No, I'm not. I am more concerned about the offense being up and down and up and down and up and down. They can't be going 3 and out on 3 consecutive possessions and putting their defense in a bad spot. The defense has picked the offense up way more often than vice versa so far this season. So the biggest concern coming out of this game isn't the 2 touchdowns given up by the defense in the fourth quarter. It's the health of Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting, and Mike Edwards, because there's not a lot of depth there. You already had Logan Ryan out for the game, so that leaves you with Antoine Winfield Jr. and Keanu Neal. You had Zion McCollum making his NFL debut, and now you're going to have to ask him to come in and start if Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting are not healthy. Those are my biggest takeaways on the defensive side of the ball. and what I believe Bucs fans should be concerned about. I will be back later on with the full episode. I thank all of you for joining in on YouTube for this live postcast episode of Locked On Bucs. If there's anything that you want to discuss or any thoughts, ideas, questions, reactions from the game, you can leave us a voicemail at 813-444-5841. And of course, you can send us an email to lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com. Check out all of my written work over at bucksnation.com. You can check out David's over at bucksgameday.com. And of course, follow everything on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucks, and at DHarrison82. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding rest of your Sunday. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire those cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here at Locked On Bucs.